this is a podcast all about Bears. You either cheering for this team or just pulling your hair. I like to take a minute, just sit right back and tell you how I became the #1 Bears fan.
That boy is Benny Hunter.
Cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic. People, this the intro. Sacramento, California, born and raised. And Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down.
What's going on, Bears fans? Before I get this episode started, I have to tell you guys about MyBookie. This year, I'm betting the football season with MyBookie. When betting with MyBookie, you'll receive a 100% match on your very first deposit up to $1,000.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
Betting with MyBookie this season was the obvious choice for me because every time this happens,
Touchdown Bears!
or this happens,
80-yard touchdown run!
I win. The best part about this whole thing is that you can support the show by using the promo code KOTM. So Bears fans, what are you waiting for? Go to mybookie.ag, use my promo code KOTM, and receive a 100% match on your first deposit up to $1,000 and make it a winning season with MyBookie today.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. Before you get this episode started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Keek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. So the Chicago Bears have bounced back in a very, very huge way by beating the Cincinnati Bengals at home 20-17. I actually had the pleasure to go to this football game. I'm actually recording live right now in Chicago in my hotel room, where my fiance and I actually went to the Bears game. We saw it live. It was really, really cool. A really, really good game. And the Bears pulled out a hard-earned win to even out their record to 1-1. But before I go any further in this podcast, I kind of want to show you guys my live experience at Soldier Field right now.
Let's go!
I hope you guys enjoyed a couple of those clips. I didn't get too much because, one, it was super hot, and the seats are really close at Soldier Field, so it was kind of hard for me to get my camera out and get a lot of footage. But I did get Allen Robinson's touchdown like you guys saw. Got some of us celebrating, singing the Bear Down fight song, so that was also cool. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. So now looking at this game where the Bears beat the Bengals 20-17. And something I want to get off my chest right away is the score doesn't indicate how bad the Bears actually beat the Bengals. I think we really owned the Bengals today. Going into that fourth quarter with 6 minutes left, the Chicago Bears were up on the Cincinnati Bengals 20-3, and the Bengals were able to storm back, and I'll go into all that as I go through this podcast episode. But first, let's go through some stats. Andy Dalton, 9 for 11, 56 yards and a touchdown. David Montgomery, 20 carries, 61 yards. Allen Robinson, 2 catches, 24 yards. 1 touchdown. Could have been 2, but of course he dropped 1. I'll go into that later. But the story of the day was the Chicago Bears defense bouncing back after a horrible Week 1 game against Los Angeles Rams, where they looked like they didn't know what they were doing. Miscommunication on multiple occasions against the Rams, but they bounced back in a huge way to 3 interceptions, which one of them was returned for a pick 6 by Roquan Smith, which had an absolutely amazing day. Roquan Smith is an amazing football player, and he showed it today. They had 4 sacks. They were constantly in Joe Burrow's face. And those 3 interceptions actually came on back-to-back drives. So as you guys can probably notice, I was super, super pumped up about that. And when Roquan Smith returned that pick 6, I was actually in the end zone that he returned it to. So that was awesome to see. Obviously, the defense still had a couple of miscommunications at the end of the game. And also, there was a time in the game where when the Bengals scored their first 3 points, Robert Quinn had a really unnecessary flag when we were getting off the field. But other than that, the Bears defense came to play, and it kind of eased my nerves about the secondary and about this defense. Yes, we played the Cincinnati Bengals, but this was a Cincinnati Bengals team that has a lot of good young talent in Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase. Joe Burrow looked really good in week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. So it was really good to see our defense bounce back in a huge way. Another big storyline here in this game was that Andy Dalton got hurt at around the end of the first half. Then came in Justin Fields. Andy Dalton was playing really well. Like I said, he went 9 for 11, 56 yards and a touchdown. He was executing the game plan. I don't really think the Cincinnati Bengals really had a game plan for Andy Dalton. He was playing really well. Had a couple of nice scrambles. And he got hurt. He got hurt on one of those scrambles. It kind of messed up his knee. Justin Fields ended up coming in and playing the entire second half. Of course, as you guys can imagine, Bears fans, including myself, were super excited to see Justin Fields. But obviously, Justin Fields wasn't prepared to be the starter. Obviously, the Bears only have a couple of plays for his disposal for him to come in. So obviously, he wasn't preparing to play a full game or a full half, right? So it was really interesting to see how the Bears had to adjust, which at the end of the day is Matt Nagy's fault. So Justin Fields' stats for today's game was 6 for 13, 60 yards. He had a terrible interception in that game as well. And he also impressed on the ground, like we already know what he can do, for 10 carries for 31 yards. Had a really huge scramble at the end of the fourth quarter to basically seal the game for the Chicago Bears. I feel that Justin Fields played pretty well, obviously, outside that interception. I think the Bengals were in a cover zero, and the linebacker ended up dropping out of that cover zero and confused Justin Fields, and he threw that terrible interception. For the most part, Bears fans were super excited to see Justin Fields, and there were a couple of disgruntled fans when Justin Fields threw that interception. But here's a couple of things that I want you guys to realize about Justin Fields playing today. The first thing that I had on my mind, he only had a certain number of plays at his disposal. Like I just mentioned earlier in the podcast, Justin Fields wasn't really prepared to play a full half, and that's not on Justin Fields, that's on Matt Nagy. He should have him ready to go. So obviously there was only a certain number of plays that Matt Nagy can actually call for Justin Fields. You can tell, especially at the beginning of at the end of the first half and going into the start of the second, Matt Nagy was calling plays really conservative, trying to keep Justin Fields in the pocket, when I know for damn sure that Justin Fields is an outside the pocket quarterback, and it didn't really seem that Matt Nagy was really calling the right plays for Justin Fields. Number 2, Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney both dropped dimes from Justin Fields. Justin Fields, I think it was on third down, threw an absolute dime in Allen Robinson's pocket, and he just clearly dropped it. On another one, when Justin Fields entered the game, he rolled out a little bit, threw a dime to Darnell Mooney right off his fingertips. Both of those balls could have been caught by both of our top wide receivers. If they catch those balls, I think Justin Fields' stat line is a whole lot better than 6 for 13 for 60 yards. But obviously you move on from those plays. Obviously if Justin Fields is named the starter for some reason, Andy Dalton can't go, I obviously expect him to play better. So number 3 is just what I just said. If Justin Fields is named the starter, give him a full week to game plan, and hopefully Matt Nagy will make it all about Justin Fields and use his talent. Roll him out, right? Don't just keep him in the pocket. Utilize his talents, and I think it would be a lot better showing when it's a full week of preparation for Mr. Justin Fields. So outside the lack of basically finishing, you're up 20-3 with 6 minutes left, and we basically almost blow the game. Thank God we didn't blow the game. I would have been super mad right now on the podcast, but we finished strong. Montgomery finished it off with a nice, I think, 5-yard run to end and seal the game. But when you're up 20-3 with 6 minutes left, you have to finish games. And then I think on the defense side of the ball, you have to get rid of the little stupid penalties like the one Robert Quinn had today. But other than that, I'm pleased with how this football team played, and I'm pleased how we bounced back against a pretty confident Cincinnati Bengals team coming in the Soldier Field. So like always, down below in the comment section, let me know how you guys feel about the Bears' 20-17 win over the Cincinnati Bengals. But before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to get all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Kick on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for all new Bears podcasts right here on Kick on the Mic. Bear down, guys.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You Keek on the